Today's exercise is going to focus on building your harmonic vocabulary, really through exploration using a folk song. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is going to be the piece that we use, but we can use really any number of basic traditional folk songs to do this exercise. We want to do this in different keys. And I'll show you some other different ways to increase the difficulty level of this. So the opening of the video, you saw a more advanced version of working this piece, starting in the key of E flat. The idea is that the bass line is always moving chromatically. The melody is the same, and it really forces you to think and to really hear the sounds that are between the melody and the bass line, and what can we make fit. Each beat that we play will actually become a kind of static area, a harmonic static area, and we're really focused just on that particular chord, just that space. Okay, we're really thinking and hearing the chord vertically. So let me just go ahead and get started. There are a few kind of guidelines that will help. With the left hand, we want to play we want to try to limit like third intervals and focus more on fourths, fifths, sixth intervals, and seventh intervals. We want to avoid octaves because we want to really kind of build this harmonic palette. And now if you're in a really tight space, like at the beginning, thirds, fourths, and fifths work really well on the left hand. But the further and further that the melody drifts apart from the actual bass line, then you're going to want to use sixth and seventh intervals. Okay? So, we have our melody. And to start with, we're going to do our bass line in half step. So we're not moving beat to beat as you saw in the opening. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to zoom in on these first two beats here. And what we want to do is figure out, all right, let's add a voice, okay? We want to get to at least four voiced chords on these. So we can add a voice in the left hand, we can make it a fifth, C and a G. Now that limits us what we can do in the right hand, but I see an A, and that gives me like a fifth and a sixth. That sounds pretty nice. Well, what if I throw in just a third interval in the left hand as well? So that would work. We're filling in the voicing, right? We're just experimenting with the inner voicings. What if I drop the E to an E flat? So this is a C minor 6 chord. Now, if I have a third in the left hand, if I got a quality of a chord, then maybe I can drop the fifth and see what that sounds like. So that opens up the sound somewhat. When you add fifths to the mix, it fills up the harmony, it kind of constricts that area there, which sometimes we want. I'm just going to go ahead and make a decision here. I'm going to drop this A. Oh, he's lock in here. I'm going to put this A right here. And then I'm going to just do a third right there. I'm going to keep it simple. All right, so those are my first two beats. Now, if you know what the chord that it's building, let's go ahead and throw that into the mix here as well. All right, up next. And we're going to go ahead and ignore this part here. We're going to play it in the melody, but we're going to keep all the other voicings held. Okay, this is just a starting point. Now we have a G and a B. We have more space to work with here. Now, I'm going to try to avoid the B in the right hand to double the bass note if I can. So let's see here. I'm going to try, let's see what happens with the seventh interval. And then maybe with my inner voices in the right hand, see what I can come up with. That's an interesting sound right there. Now, let me lower this left thumb a half step. really like that sound right there. It's nice and abstract. We have a B, we have a G sharp or an A flat. We'll just call it an A flat, a D, and a G. And really the goal with this is to be able to do this on the fly. So the exercise that you saw at the beginning is me working through the fly in the key of E flat, chromatic, E flat to E flat, and seeing what happens. All right, and then we're going to do an A flat on this one. All right, now let's go back together and see what that sounds like. Nice edgy sound right there. Okay. This is actually an A diminished with a major 7. So, sorry, this is an A flat diminished. Now it also depends on where we're going, so the function of this chord matters, but this is an A flat diminished, and then we have a major 7 there. Alright, so now we have an A and a B flat. Now there are certain strong intervals between bass and melody we have to pay attention to. Like minor seconds, minor seconds would be really minor ninths in this case because we don't want the melody and the bass that close, okay? So we have major sevenths, tritones, flat 5, all are dissonant intervals. And so those really kind of like give us less options to work with than some of the other intervals. Now I see this major 7th interval separated by an octave, so I already know I'm probably going to be working with some kind of major 7th or major 9th type chord. And then there are other options like a minor major 7. But let's just see what happens. I'm going to build a 6th in the left hand. And now I'm just going to experiment with voices in between in the right hand. Nice open sound right there. Now the thing about this particular voicing is I keep the D from earlier. So if you can keep a voice from a previous chord, that helps to connect it a lot smoother. So I'm going to play with this. And this is a B flat major 13 chord. We have the 1, the 3, we have the 7, and then once you have the 7, then that now opens up to your extension. So this G, which is a 6, becomes a 13. So that's why it's so important to use 6 intervals. It gives you really these really interesting sounds, either inverted chords or you're actually playing the 6 or the 13 in the left hand. So B flat, we have a G, D, and an A. All right, so look at that. We tied that together. All right, especially when you do chromatic bass harmony, you want to keep voices tied together. Now let's go back and see if there's anything we can do about this here. You know what? I'm gonna change the A to an A flat, so then so I can keep the A flat voicing, just to kind of try to keep this principle connected together all the way through. So I'm gonna change this to an A flat. Now that's gonna turn that into a C augmented chord. All right, so now, and then this is a B flat major 13. Look at this. We got a C augmented, A flat diminished major 7, B flat major 13, right? We kind of got these crazy chords happening here. All just from a basic folk tune melody and using chromatic bass lines and experimenting with voicings in between. Now, a great thing to do is actually to play these blocked out. That way you don't get distracted with the rhythm or the actual shape of the melody. You can focus just on the chords themselves. All right, let's do one more for this lesson as just getting started. Okay, we have an A, we have a G. Minor seventh interval, there's a lot of things we can do with this. We can build a dominant chord, we can build minor type chord, and some other chords like sus chords. But if you don't know about all that, all you got to do is just pick a seventh or a sixth in the left hand, because if you're this far apart, we really don't want to use a fifth, because look, that leaves us all this space here to work with. So we want to use a sixth or a seventh interval. Now, the seventh interval is going to double the note. So maybe let's use, that's a little bit too strong. So I'm going to use an F. Okay, you have to listen to it. Listen for dissonances. We don't want too much because there's always going to be some weird things that we have to work with here. That's pretty consonant sounding right there. Now, do we have anything connected from before? Oh, you know what? We have a parallel movement here. That's actually pretty nice. I like that. We don't always have to have common tones. But if we did, that would be pretty strong there, so I don't like that. Alright, I do like that. So that is an F over A right there is what that is. Well, add 2. So A, F, or A, F, A, C is your F major chord. That's over A, and then the G. Since there's no seventh in this chord, we're just going to call it an add 2. It's an F, add 2 over A. Okay, so our first 4 measures sound like this. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of experiment through the rest of this here. Like these next 2 measures there. So there's so much you can do with this. What you want to do is think about the spacing between the melody and the bass note, so you put yourself in a good position to start with. Condense close together, use thirds and fourths. Far apart, sevenths and sixths, or even tenth intervals. If it's way apart, then you can use tenths. Try to avoid ninths because those are pretty dissonant in the left hand, and then adding stuff. So tenths, octaves only if necessary, but try to avoid octaves. Use fifth intervals in cases where the seventh is too strong. So a lot of times, like if you're maybe down here, in this area, this might be too strong, but this actually will tighten that frequency up together. So you can use fifth intervals, and sometimes that's the case up here where we want to use fifth intervals if your right hand is really, really close to this area, and then we can use a fifth, and then we can get creative with our inner voicings in the right hand. So that's 4 note. Now we can add a 5th note, and then we can add 6 notes, sometimes 7 note voicings. I think about 5 to 6 is where you probably want to max out at, especially starting out with. And just go through the exercise. Every time you do this, you're going to come up with something unique and something special, and write it out as you go. Memorize it if you can, so you can internalize it. And then you'll be able to do this kind of on the spot. That will really, really help you to get out of that space where you're maybe afraid to play or fearful of these kind of interesting, colorful, but dissonant harmonies. So this is a great exercise to get you out of that and to be able to discover new things as well. So best of luck.